First, remove these 4 screws. Next, carefully pull up on each side grip until the back shell unclips. And be careful not to accidentally rip out the ribbon cable. Gently pull up and release the ribbon cable. Next, you'll need your pliers or flush cutters. You'll need to cut off these 2 supports from the back shell. This is what it should look like when finished, being careful not to destroy the upper trigger supports. Next, you'll need to lift up on the battery. It's being held down by double-sided tape. Disconnect the battery from its battery connector. Then, unscrew the battery tray screw and you'll be able to lift up on the battery tray. Next, you'll need to carefully disconnect the touchpad ribbon cable. Then you'll be able to separate the mid bracket from the front faceplate by lifting straight up. The motherboard is being held onto the mid bracket by 2 small clips. You'll need to push straight up to be able to release the motherboard. Verify that your controller is JDM 055 or 050. Next, you'll need to unclip the triggers from the rails by pushing straight outwards. You'll need to push in an outward motion from the middle. On the left trigger, push left, and on the right trigger, push right. Once they've become unclipped from the rails, you can safely unhook from the bottom hook. These small rectangles is where you'll add the glue. Do them one at a time. Carefully slide the correct trigger bracket into its corresponding guided rectangle. Here's a small diagram of what it should look like when you're sliding the trigger bracket in correctly. Take note of where the front rail guide should be. Before the glue sets, carefully slide the trigger back underneath its trigger hook. Then, firmly press the trigger down back onto its rail clips. Be sure that the trigger is seated correctly and that the trigger is properly secured above its spring. Double check that the mouse button clicks and that the trigger springs back up easily. Make sure that the mouse button is horizontal against the bottom of the trigger. If it's slightly crooked, push up on the white bracket and make it horizontal. Be sure to do this before the glue sets. Next, do the exact same steps for the other side. You'll see that on this side, the mouse button isn't perfectly horizontal. It still clicks, however I'm going to push up on the white bracket and keep it held there until the glue sets. I'm making sure that the trigger can still spring back up correctly while I'm pushing up on the white bracket. Now the mouse button is perfectly horizontal on both sides. Take note that in this tutorial, the front rail guides are crooked and snapped on one side. This is to show that if your front rail guides become broken during installation or arrive broken from shipping, then the kit is still perfectly usable. You'll just have to hold the white bracket in place or move it upwards so that the glue can set it in place properly. Next, you'll need to take your solderless PCB and sandwich it above the original PCB. Make sure that the correct sized post is in the correct sized hole. Then sandwich the motherboard back on top of the mid bracket and fold over the solderless PCB. Next, you'll need to slide the mid bracket back into the front faceplate. Make sure that the touchpad ribbon cable makes it through its corresponding hole, and then reconnect the touchpad ribbon cable. Make sure that the new trigger cables are routed downward and away from all three of the battery holder holes. Next, reattach the battery holding tray and screw down the screw, making sure that the cables are still out of the way. Reconnect the battery and attach it back down to its double-sided tape. Tuck the trigger cables downwards and away from everything else. You can set them above the rumble motor holders. Next, you're going to need to reconnect the backplate ribbon cable. Before reconnecting the backplate, make sure that you have properly modified it as showed earlier. Make sure to properly align the light bar reflector into its hole. click the backplate securely back into place. Finally, re-add the 4 back screws and make sure that the light bar still turns on.